Everybody, thanks for watching. Now, a lot of people always ask the question, what is it that's keeping the religious community and the conscious community, separate? And apart from the obvious reasons that one believes something the other one does not, is it possible for the two sides to actually come together and actually dialogue on things that can actually help the Black community despite of beliefs? And there's a lot of reasons why, that won't happen and that can't happen. And this is something that I wanted to outline in this video because I get the question a lot. And it's something that a lot of people need to understand if they're looking for that kind of solution. So one of the main problems is ego and rationality. You have one side that basically wants to come together and use the essential items necessary to have a smart, successful conversation. So if you're coming to the table and you are not willing to use rationality or logic or reason or common sense, these things are essential to a smart, successful conversation between human beings. If you don't come to the table with these things, then there's no way there can be any kind of rational conversation or, any kind of building or, any kind of successful, confrontation or conversation between two parties. Throughout history, when you look and you have civilizations coming into contact with other civilizations, people who meet and there's a language barrier, what keeps you together, what keeps the conversation going, or the two people staying engaged is rationality, logic. If I'm talking about something that you may not understand in my language, I can draw it on the ground and show you what I'm talking about. It's rational, something that we can easily come together on. Oh, okay, I know what that is. But if you're willing to forego rationality and logic and place, faith or belief in its place, that is just not something that a rational, logical, person who uses their brain and uses common sense can actually deal with. So if I'm trying to tell you 1 + 1 is 2, and you're trying to tell me it's 7, it's nothing that we can come together on to get your answer. It's not going to happen. So when talking about religion and talking about consciousness, when one person is bringing to the table stuff that they can prove, facts, things that make sense, things that, fits within the realm of logic and common sense and rationality, then, you can't go against that with something that makes absolutely no sense at all. Something that does not work and fit in no kind of reality that we can think of besides, imagination, wishful thinking. So besides this, there are some other things as well. These are just basic issues we can look at on the surface and say, well, yeah, of course, if we can't come together logically, then it's just no reason to come together at all. We might as well stay separated, because you have two groups that come together and they can't agree on something logical. Frustration sets in, and when people get frustrated, they get violent, they get angry, and there's no reason for that to go down when you can just avoid the whole situation altogether and stay separated. So because of belief, because of ego, because of this rationality situation, the two sides can't come together. But there's more, because you have to look at it deeper than that. And just, if you are a person who is objective, and you're looking at one side of something and you see flaws, it's something that you have to point out. Like, you can't be standing in front of me looking like a homeless person, talking about your Bentley, talking about your mansion. You can't stand in front of me smelling like a bag of onions with beat up clothes on, saying that you're rich. So anybody with any kind of logic and common sense can't sit there and listen to a person preach so much about the Bible, preach so much about religion, yet they do not follow the religion themselves. They are not true Christians. They go against the book and they sin every single day, yet they are willing to get into a fight with you and argue and shout with you and shout against what you are saying, knowing that they don't live by what the book says is right before God, knowing they don't really read the book. They don't know the history of the book. They don't know what the book says. They don't understand the book. So when you speak into a person who would go through so much trouble as to argue and fight and, kind of sort of stalk you, to prove their point about a book that they don't understand, they don't read, they don't live by, this is a person that defies logic, rationality, and a person who you can't have an intelligent conversation with. So like I said, a homeless person can't walk up to you and talk about their mansion and Benz and everything when they're living on the street. It doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. So this is what we see when we speak to these people, and a lot of people who ain't got time for that. I don't got time for games. Got time for bullshit. So I'm not going to sit here and debate with a person that does not follow the book, doesn't read the book, doesn't understand the book, and is just a hypocrite. So we're talking about the black community here. We're talking about black people. And you have black people who look at our history, and we just can't fathom why anybody would choose the Bible as a religion, as a practicing religion to live by, to base their lives off of, when we was getting this book, during slavery. If you're reading the King James Version, if you're reading any of these, new translations or what have you, they are derived from the King James Version. Don't act like you're going back and you're reading the ancient manuscripts, because you don't have them. You do not have them, nor can most people read them. So you're going by the King James Version that was given to us during slavery. We got taught about Jesus and everything like that during slavery. So it's tough for any kind of black person who understands black history to accept this book based on that. Because of this, you'll get people who go different routes religious-wise. You have some black people who will just say they're atheists. Not all black people are conscious who are not Christian or Muslim or what have you. Some people choose to use common sense and logic and say, well, wait a minute. This guy's supposed to do this and that, and I keep hearing about how good this God is, yet I'm not seeing it happen for my people. So based on that alone, this is a book I cannot accept. So when you have, the religious community, i.e. the, example, the Hebrew Israelites, who want to make excuses about our oppression by saying that black people are cursed. How fitting that we get this book during slavery and it's talking about black people being cursed as a result. We have slavery. We're suffering, oppression. So when you have black people who want to take this route and look to a book that says that we are cursed, what is any kind of person supposed to do with that has common sense? And then you have regular Christians who can't justify slavery. They can't justify it. They can't explain why God, who speaks of love, peace, and mercy, is going to allow slavery and allow black people to go through what they're going through. So it's crazy to try to reason with these people. So you have some black people who actually believe that there's some kind of, divine understanding to why black people are in this position, that this is somehow God's will, that we somehow deserve what we're going through. They're looking at the situation of black people and how we are forced into poverty, which creates crime. And we see everything that we're seeing in the media as far as the negativity, the stereotypes of African Americans and black people. And people are sucking all that in and making excuses and using the stuff that was created to destroy our image to justify our position, saying that this is somehow God's will, that we are oppressed. But when you look in the Bible, what does the Bible say about oppression? So let's look at Zechariah 7:10. It says, "And oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor, and let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart." Ezekiel 22:29-31 says, "The people of the land have practiced extortion and committed robbery. They have oppressed the poor and needy, and have extorted from the sojourner without justice. And I sought for a man among them who should build up the wall and stand in the breach before me for the land, that I should not destroy it. But I found none. Therefore I have poured out my indignation upon them. I have consumed them with the fire of my wrath. I have returned their way upon their heads, declares the Lord God." Jeremiah 22:3 says, "Thus saith the Lord, do justice and righteousness, and deliver the one who has been robbed from the power of his oppressor. Also do not mistreat or do violence to the stranger, the orphan, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place." So you have the Bible itself talking against oppression, talking about what you should and should not do as far as, the people. We understand that black people, we suffer from oppression. We are going through oppression. And the Bible is completely speaking out against it. In a lot of different instances, a lot of different verses, you'll see that. So how do you justify what we are experiencing, as black people? How do you justify that? What are we supposed to do when you have a book that you follow saying that you should not be oppressed, yet you accept the oppression from your oppressor, and you want us to do the same as well? So even though you have these people who say they read the Bible, they understand the Bible, they're Bible believers, and we say this to them about oppression, they can't even point out these verses. They can't even go to them because they don't know them. They can't go to a verse that says we should be oppressed, that this is supposed to happen to us. And again, as I have proved, if you want to go by the Hebrew Israelites and say, well, Deuteronomy this and that, I've shown you where it doesn't say the same in the ancient manuscripts, in the oldest manuscripts, that it's from the King James Version, his version. And you can't go back in Codex Sinaiticus or Codex Vaticanus or the Latin Vulgate or Vetus Latina and find the same exact thing in Deuteronomy 28 as you do in those books. I've shown you where Deuteronomy 28:68 is talking about children. It's not talking about going back to Egypt on ships. I pointed that out in ancient manuscripts, in older manuscripts. So we know, one, that the book has been changed. The whole argument that the Bible is perfect is already proven. It's proven without a shadow of a doubt to be not true. How is it perfect when we have the oldest copies full of mistakes and errors? So this is another thing. So it's things like this that's going to get people not to come together when one side has a legitimate, rational argument that basically destroys the other side, but the other side is saying, so what? Or ignoring it. How are we supposed to come together when the other side don't want to even discuss the facts or the truth, or to be rational or logical? How are we supposed to have a dialogue or talk it out when one side believes such craziness versus the other side who is basically trying to put forward rational thinking, things that we're going to need to follow as far as coming together and doing something about our situation. So if you're not willing to follow such basic rational things, nothing's going to work. And on top of that, if you're so willing to be that fake to yourself and to the guy who you claim, you follow, what is that going to do for a bunch of strangers who you don't know just because we're black? If you're going to go against your own self, your own logic, and lie on yourself, and lie about what you do, and lie against the God that you're supposed to fear or what have you, what does that say about your mental state? So again, you're having these people go so crazy about religion and will leave crazy comments long. And none of it has any facts They're going off their emotions. If you have a person do all this and then not understand that, well, the simple fact that you're on social media goes against your religion, what is that? The simple fact that you're here is wrong. The simple fact that you don't follow your book in truth, you don't read it, you're not living by it. So what is the point of this? You just want to argue. You have issues. These are people who we can't have a serious, smart, successful conversation with. So there's no excusing the book. There's no excusing what we have been seeing. And anybody that is rational, anybody who does any kind of research will get it. So there's a lot of contradictions in the Bible. 1 minute, don't oppress people, don't do this, don't do that. But you have God himself allow oppression and death and murder and genocide in the Bible. So this confuses a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand why, we speak against the book, because when you actually read it, it's a book that's telling you something that we can resonate with as African people. You can look at the book and say, well, wait a minute, this is our story, but it's flipped around and put in a certain way to confuse us. Anytime that you are going to try to justify murder and genocide, the rape and death of your people, you're going to try to justify that somehow, that's self-hate. You hate yourself. You hate what you're seeing, but you don't want to realize what you're seeing was made to be that way. Because you can't go back to the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and say black people was gangbanging and selling drugs. We still was oppressed. We still was being hung. We still was being beaten. We still was going through the craziness that we're seeing still to this day. We was going through it. You go back 50s, 60s, and 70s, you still see this mess. What is the excuse? What kind of logic can you give to justify these actions? You can't use crack. You can't use hip hop. You can't use, black people are just, lazy and this and that, when we have proof of our success and the fact that we were growing in wealth and success and had it taken away. How do you justify this? You can't look at it and say, it's somehow we deserve what we are seeing, when we have dug ourselves out of so many holes and come into positions of almost being, successful as a people, then have been stopped by the powers that be and this system. So you can't explain this to a rational person who knows history, who read the book, who understand what it's talking about. You can't explain it to people who really know what's going on and try to justify what we're seeing, especially when you yourself don't follow the book. And you have a lot of religious people that complain about the government. They complain about, so many things that the government is doing as far as interfering in our lives. And I always say, well, what are you complaining about? This is a part of your God's plan. So it's tough to have any kind of dialogue when you have things like this, in place. And these type of things have to be pointed out. We can't come together as people and then make decisions based on religion. Some people want to say just have faith. And us coming together and doing something that is not going by religion is completely going against the Christian religion itself. So you have Christians who ask the question, why can't we come together? Why can't we talk about this? It's because your religion won't allow it. You're not even supposed to be talking to me. I'm not a believer. You ain't supposed to be dealing with me. You're not supposed to be coming into a situation that is considered worldly. So it's something that's not going to get done as long as religion exists, which is why I'm so against the Bible as far as religion and people following it or acting like they following it. I'm against the way it's being taught. The book has knowledge. It has hidden knowledge. There's a lot of stuff in it to teach you about the truth. As I point out in my videos, a lot of things in that book. I never tell people to just throw it away. I say it's bullshit based upon the way you have been taught and what you believe it is. Bullshit. But when you understand the truth about the book and what's going on and what it's really talking about and what's hidden in it, this is the part I want people to embrace and accept, because it's the part that's the truth that makes more sense. It's the part that's going to bring everything together. And people, think we just somehow, we just jumped on the bandwagon of ancient Egypt and everything like that, and we follow in the Hotep crowd and all that. No, when you actually study the book, that's where it leads you. It leads you back to Kemet. It leads you back to Egypt. That's where it leads you. So if you're studying the book and you're really studying it, there's no way you're not going to end up back in Egypt. This is how you can tell who actually reads and study the book and who does not. And I always say that to people. I'm not even going to really jump into the conversation because the way you're talking right now tells me that you haven't read the book. You don't know what it's talking about. You're going off of what you have been programmed to say, what you have heard in church. And this is something that some people just don't have the time to deal with when we have, so many more serious problems in our way. Why are you concerned about police brutality? Your God is not, obviously. Why are you concerned about the black community? Your God is not, obviously. So you're supposed to be following him. You're not supposed to be following us. And this is one of the main reasons why we can't come together. So as I talked about in previous videos, the Bible is the justification for the genocide that has been, done to African people. The book is talking about how God commanded these people to go into these African countries and basically wipe them out and take the land, save nothing alive, kill everything that breathed, take their shit. This is what has happened to us. Plain and simple. So the Bible is justifying genocide, and this is of black people. So why would you, want to follow that as a black person? I don't understand that. If you actually read the book and understand what it's talking about, it's mind-boggling to me to see so many, black people, following the book, going to church and praising Jesus and all emotional, hands up in the air, and with the shit we've been seeing, on TV. All the murders and innocent people being killed. How do you justify that to yourself? You got to feel some type of way. But people just, look the other way. Somehow have this emotion that they somehow deserved it. You shouldn't have ran. You shouldn't have talked back. You shouldn't have this. What's going on? And the brainwashing is so real. It's so real. So, slavery is the biggest part that we look at in concerning the Bible. And you just can't justify that. And what you have is those unlearned Christians who will come out and say, it wasn't slave. The Bible's not talking about slavery. It's talking about servants. Oh, it's more servants. Servants. And the Bible actually differentiates between servants and slaves. It talks about them clearly as, what servants are and what slaves is. Now, if you are a servant, you shouldn't be beaten. If you are a servant, you shouldn't have to follow certain orders, against, your freedom. You should be paid for what you are doing. There's a clear definition between a servant and a slave. A slave ain't getting paid. A servant is. So you can't look at every instance in the Bible where it says slave and say, well, that word's supposed to be servant. Because if you read certain verses, it's not pertaining to a person that would be a servant, but a slave. So, for example, when you read Deuteronomy 24:14-15 says, you shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether one of your brethren or one of the aliens who is in your land within your gates. Each day you shall give him his wages, and not let the sun go down on it, for he is poor and he has set his heart on it, lest he cry out against you to the Lord, and it be sin to you. So when that verse is saying, don't oppress people. Give these servants their money, because if you don't, they're going to pray to God, about what you're doing to them that's wrong. And it's going to be a sin against you. So pay these people. So we're not talking about a slave in this case. It's clearly talking about a paid servant that's getting paid to do something. So if you're a butler, you're a servant, they get paid. Butlers make money. So I was not talking about a slave. So when you see verses pertaining to slavery, it's talking about slaves. So you have these black people who clearly want to try to make it like the Bible's not talking about slavery. Bible's not big on slavery because, after all, God did send Moses to free the slave Jews or what have you. But we went through slavery in real life. So if you believe that the Bible is real and that this stuff actually happened, what happened to black folks? What happened to black folks for, over 1,200 years of slavery, amongst the Arabs and these Christian Europeans. What happened? There was no Moses, no deliverer to come to save us. We had to fight our way out of there. So, how do you justify this? So the argument that it's not talking about slaves, it's talking about servants can be cleared up just by reading the book. And this is what we're talking about. People are not reading the book, so they're not understanding what we're saying. They're using their own twisted logic to say, well, of course, God doesn't want slavery. It's talking about servants. Of course, God, who speaks of love, peace, and mercy, doesn't want slavery. It's talking about servants, when clearly the book is telling you something different. Case in point, Colossians 3:22-25. It says, slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything you do. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. Serve them sincerely because of the reverent fear of the Lord. Work willingly at everything you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Think about that. Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you are working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward for being a slave. What? And that the master you are serving is Christ. But if you do what is wrong, you will be paid back for the wrong you have done. For God has no favorites. Come on. So you get people who say, well, that's just Old Testament talk when slavery was going on and people was going through slavery. That happened way back in the day when slavery was going on. That's when the Bible was talking about slavery. When you have clearly in the New Testament, the Bible talking about slavery. But not only that, saying slave clearly started off with the word slave. That you are basically a slave. Your master is God. Treat your slave master as if he was Christ. You have Ephesians. Ephesians 6:5 says, slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ. So what does this sound like to you? Come on. This is where that whole common sense thing comes into play, and you're going to have that Christian who don't read the book try to justify these verses somehow. When the book is clearly telling you, doesn't it sound more like they're trying to justify slavery? Oh, it's okay. You're a slave. Do what you're supposed to do. Act like you really love the slave master and do everything you're supposed to do. And don't be mad. Don't act crazy because you're going to get your inheritance. When is that? When did that happen for all those slaves, over 400 years ago? When they saw these verses and thinking, okay, let's do what the master say and everything's going to be okay. When did it happen for them? Because they died. They was dead and gone. We're talking about 1611, King James Version came out. We fast forward, what happened 100 years after that, after this verse is clearly in there talking about people supposed to be reading it, should be reaping some kind of reward from it, but they're supposed to die to get their inheritance. What is their inheritance? It's supposed to be the kingdom of heaven. You got to die to get yours, but it says at the end of the verse, God doesn't basically show favoritism. But clearly that the Europeans, the white people are being, given favor over African people. Clearly the verse is trying to say, chill out, do what the white master says, do what the slave master says, and do so as if he is God. Do so as if he is Christ. Do so as if you disobeying him is going to disobey God. So when we say that these people, when I talk about them placing themselves as God on this planet, this is what I mean. It's given it to you clear as day in the book. When I say this government system is taking the role of God, this is what I'm talking about. So you can see clearly who your oppressor is. And for you to have fear and trembling of the white man as you would God, what kind of brain do you have to not put two and two together to say, the white man created this book to make himself look like God? This is what we're talking about. So when you have people act like they read the Bible and get all crazy and excited and upset when you point out one little thing because they act like they read the book. When you have people act like they're reading it and don't actually read it, they don't see verses like this. That's clearly telling them, something is up. And when we point this stuff out, we get no real, rational or, common sense reply. You get people who just want you to accept oppression because they believe this is what God wants. That somehow you talking against the Bible is somehow going against everything that is good that has ever existed. When you haven't seen good from this God. You haven't seen it happen. So it's brainwashing. This is why I stick to that word, because clearly these people have no logic. So as I have just shown you, clearly the book differentiates between a servant and a slave. If you're a slave, you have no rights. You have nothing that's going to save you or help you. You are to do exactly what you are told. You ain't getting paid. It's so many Bible verses that's talking about slavery. It's so many Bible verses that justify slavery. How to beat, house, rape. When is it going to be legal or illegal to kill them? It's crazy. So much stuff pertaining to slavery in the book that's supposed to be from a God that talks about love, peace, mercy, and forgiveness. How do you justify that? Especially during the time of Christ, when Christ is supposed to have come and everything's supposed to be different according to these so-called Christians who don't read their book. Oh, slavery was a long time ago. But you have in the New Testament, it's still talking about slavery, slavery, slavery. How do you justify that? The book is telling you, you're a servant, you get paid. Slaves don't. And when you have so many people try to justify this to black people who keep seeing, us being oppressed and keep seeing us being killed in the streets, it's not going to resonate with any kind of logical person. I think these people are sick and there's something wrong with them. For them to be, hooping and hollering up in church, jumping around like crazy chickens, dancing around as if they're getting some kind of, something from God. What are you getting? You walk outside them doors and the neighborhood is full of poverty. And you got to worry about driving home. You got to worry about getting your head blown off. You dancing around like a chicken in church. Shit is crazy. It's madness. This is why we can't come together. As long as this religion exists, it's not going to happen. And I could jump on Islam and everything too, but it's the same type of circumstances when you look at the books. The problem is people don't want to read the damn book and listen to what it's saying and read what it's saying clearly. As I said many a times, there's no way you can read the Bible and come away being a Christian. You can't do it. You can't read the book in truth and do notes, do research, and walk away saying, yeah, this is right, it's true. It's not going to happen. If you do so, you're doing so without rationality, without logic, without common sense, going against yourself. And the reason why you can't, truly follow the book is because your subconscious understand that it's bullshit. What you read is just something that's not logical to your life, to your existence, to what you're trying to do in your day to day. It goes against it. It goes against survival, which is why you can't do it. Why you can't live by these so-called commandments and laws. Your mind won't let your body follow it. So when you have people going crazy and stalking you, leaving you all kinds of crazy messages and constantly in the comment section with this bullshit as if they follow the Bible, it's so crazy. These people, you just I try to put things in a certain way for people to let it register. Even if they act like it don't. Even if they want to still get mad and leave something, I know they read what I said or they heard what I said. And something in their brain is clicking with that. It's going to be that way. Ego is not going to allow them to say, okay, you got it right. But believe it or not, it has happened in a couple cases where I have literally changed a Christian, into a conscious person, into, critically thinking by me putting things a certain way in dialogue, which is why sometimes I might do dialogue because I know it's going to resonate with some people. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes a week, and I'm constantly responding to an email that I get from a person, but I understand in my mind that this person is coming back so much and asking so many questions because they're curious now. They're starting to ask certain questions, and then when they're getting responses that make sense, and when they're getting information that makes sense, and they start looking into it, they want more. They want to know more. They get more excited and intrigued. And there's a lot of people who I've taken out of religion, by being a little bit more patient and saying, take a look at this. I'm not going to cuss you out. I'm not going to say how stupid you sound. Just look at this, read this, do that. And for some people, that common sense and logic can kick in and, they'll know it. They'll feel it, to be the truth. As I got older, I never thought I would run into people, black people, that's supposed to be like from the hood. Never thought I would run into black people that would suffer through this kind of religious deception, because the people who I grew up with, different time, was just so real. You just couldn't get no kind of nonsense past people from the hood. That's why we say we street smart. You can't hustle a hustler. You can't hustle somebody who knows the game. And so I never thought that black people that would come from such, hostile territories where you gotta be sharp, you gotta be smart, will fall victim to something this obvious. So it blows my mind when I see some of the people who I grew up with, religious. And, I ain't talked to them in years, but they send me an email or send me a message on Facebook. Hey, yeah, such and such told me about your video. I checked it out. What happened in your life that made you turn away from the Lord? And I'm like, oh, not you too. Come on. And then again, it's tough to have a dialogue, because I'm telling you 1 + 1 is 2. But why are you telling me it's 7? What is going on? Like, no matter how much truth you put out, no matter how much sense you make, these people don't want to accept it. So some cases you got to move on. So, and coming together, we just can't do it when we can't bring logic, rationality, reason to the table. And I know a lot of people want to say, well, let's just not talk about religion at all. Let's just come together, forget religion completely, and let's just come together and figure this out. The problem is it goes against their religion. So they can't say that I'm going to be this Christian and practice this religion and say I'm going to forget the religion altogether and come together with these atheists and people who don't believe in the religion and think it's stupid. It goes against their religion, so they can't even do it. Not just that, conscious people don't want to deal with the shit. We just say move on. Not everybody is going to follow us. Not everybody is going to be, with the situation, with the movement. So some people are going to fall. It's just the way it is. Some people are just going to be left by the wayside. Some people are just going to have to suffer the consequences of not understanding facts and truth. And we have to deal with that and keep moving. The hard part is a lot of these people are family members, people who a lot of you love. I always get emails and people talking about their either boyfriend or girlfriend or their parents or what have you is caught up in religion. And it's a tough situation when you're so open and conscious and you can see clear. And it's like, damn it, look, and they don't want to do so. They still want to just, take the other side. It's frustrating. But it's one of those situations where you can only do but so much. This is where knowledge comes into play. Because again, as I just said, sometimes when you put it to people the correct way, using logic, you can get through to them. But you have to know what you're talking about. Because when you start getting into this stuff, people are going to have questions. And if you can't answer them, you're going to look like you don't know what you're talking about. You're going to look like you don't have all the answers. And this is the problem that a lot of people face, which is why I put out information. Because of course people are going to say, well, if religion is not right, then who is God? What's going on? What are we? Who created us? And all these questions is going to come about. This is why I deal with these things, as far as the information that I put out. I get into all this stuff to try to give you this information, something that you can fall back on when people say, well, how does Egypt have all the answers? Well, what is Egypt all about? So people can know that you didn't leave this unseen God, this Jesus or what have you, to go to another unseen God that doesn't exist. Because you have so many Christians that believe, we follow Horus and Osiris, and we believe that these gods actually exist, and we pray to them 24/7 or what have you. We pray to them before we eat. You have Christians who actually believe we left Jesus to go pray to this, other God or what have you. So, when you have the information that, what these people represent, what Kemet was about, and what this stuff is really talking about, and that you choose to follow it because, in truth, this is where everything is going back to. That all the secret societies and the actual knowledge that is oppressing you is coming from your people, which is crazy. So this is why I put all this stuff out and I tell people, understand it, get it, take it in. So if you're trying to bring somebody out of religion, you have all of the answers. Not all of them, but enough to, answer their questions, because they always have the same questions. I have it on my computer. I have my notes. A lot of times when I'm talking to people, dialoguing, I could just copy and paste because I've said it out so many times. Because me answering the same questions over and over again, I have it right there. I have it in my notes where I can just copy here. Because you asking the same questions, every other Christian does. Or you're saying the same things against Kemet or about the Bible that everybody else does. So it's easy to refute it. It's even more easier to look at the facts. The facts speak for themselves. History speaks for itself. What we're seeing in the news speaks for itself. If this God exists, if this God was here to somehow, treat all people equally, how come Europeans are in power? Think about that. Then when you look at that, you have to then look at the Bible was talking about in Romans about how they were put in power by God. You couple that with the verse I just read about, obey your earthly masters. Who is my earthly master? You are a slave. So your earthly master is the people who are in power, who are these white people. When am I supposed to obey them? While I'm in slavery? What's going on? But at the same time, these same people who was your slave masters, who the Bible is telling you to obey, slave, is telling you that now God put them in power. So you got to obey them again. Pray for them. With fear and trembling as you would Christ. So that's basically saying, with fear and trembling as you would God, with fear and trembling as you would the government or the white man, so to speak. Because exactly who they're telling you is in charge and who is in power. Obey these people. So, we get called so many names. We get called out so many times about us talking against the Bible and everything that is pointing to us being completely right, we can back up with facts and proof, but people are just not accepting it. And you can't have a dialogue with a person who won't accept 1 + 1 is 2, who won't accept exactly what the facts and truth is showing them goes against their book. So, this is the reason why, us coming together is just not going to happen. And it's tough to convince a person who will go through such craziness to pretend that they believe in the Bible to go against it. If you're willing to do all this lying and shucking and jiving about how much you love the Lord and you go to church and everything, knowing you lying, how can we accept you into a conscious community that's conscious, that's about truth and facts, and expect you to do something that's going to benefit us all? When you are basically harmful to yourself, you're harmful to your people. You want to justify the slavery, the oppression of your people, of your parents, your children, because they got to go through this stuff too. They got to grow up in this oppression, and you want to justify that with a book you don't read, don't understand, and don't live by. So it's tough, and it's stuff that you got to think about and contemplate. Until we get rid of this religion, we're not going to have unity, which is why more of my videos will always focus on that Bible. I don't care how much people don't like it. I stay pounding the book because I want to get as much information out there as possible for people to use and to have to help combat this problem. So if you have the information, as I said, to answer the questions from your loved ones about the Bible or what have you, then you can be more successful as far as getting people out of the religion and coming onto the side of consciousness and joining a real movement and ending oppression, racism, and everything else that we're suffering from. So unless this is your concern and what you're trying to do, there's no reason for us to come together and debate about a book that you don't even read or follow. It's a waste of time. So yeah, I wanted to put this out. A lot of people had questions about this, and something I've been wanting to talk about before, which I did touch on before in previous videos. But I want to get into this now. So, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch. I see you guys next video. Thanks to everybody who's been supporting. And definitely pay attention to what's coming next after these storms. A lot of religious people want to jump up and say this is the end times, the end of the world, because they don't want to accept the fact that these storms could have been, produced by our government, the same system that they basically worship in, that they don't understand. Pay attention to what's coming after the storm. As I said, it's not natural. This is something that was done. Don't care what nobody says. Too much data to support that. So pay attention. Thanks for taking the time to watch. See you next video.